I'm Tom. I'm an architect. I co-own the practice studio 163 Architects, which is based in Norwich and also mostly in London as well.
Hello, I'm Lea, and as Tom said, I just co-own as well. I'm the director of Studio 163 Architects that we set up maybe 4 years ago together.
Amazing. So what does your educational journey look like?
So I did the sort of traditional route in some respects. There's 3 parts to being an architect. Part 1 I did, which is undergrad in Bath in the West Country. That was like a sort of sandwich course where you do your second and third year, half of it in practice. And I was lucky enough to travel for those 2 years. So it was kind of 2010, like things were pretty bad, like post-banking crisis. Not many jobs around. So I ended up traveling sort of throughout Europe in different sort of small placements, which is really amazing experience. One in Italy, one in Spain, one in France. And they all kind of, they're just sort of life experiences as well as professional experiences. So that was my part 1. I then worked for a year in Cambridge in practice. And then I went to London for my master's and then stayed there for like 10 years in practice. So that was my sort of training.
I'm French, so I did my studies in France in Lyon. So I just stayed there for almost the whole duration of my studies. But then in the first year of master, we had the opportunity to travel abroad for a year. So I did the Erasmus exchange, which doesn't exist anymore because of Brexit. But it's when I went to Bath University. And so it's where I met Tom. And then I came back to Lyon to finish my last year of master and then moved to England to get a job in London. And then maybe a year or 2 after getting my job in London, I did my part 3 in Westminster University in London to finish my studies. So to be a fully registered architect. So less travel than to my part a year abroad, I guess.
So you have your own business. What made you want to start that?
That's a good question.
I mean, I think it was, a lot of it was born out of the pandemic in many respects. So we were both working in practice in London. We moved back to Norfolk just to live there. The plan was always to go back to London. Mm-hmm. And then I think as time went on, we just sort of started to reevaluate our sort of priorities and our kind of lifestyle. And I think having our own practice, we believe enabled us to have more flexibility in our lifestyle. There's obviously a lot of different kind of stress involved, but we thought it would improve our lifestyle, which we think it has. And also be able to do our own projects and to express ourselves a bit more freely, I suppose. It's always been an objective, I think, but it maybe just was accelerated by the situation we were in at that time.
And I guess we were in bigger practice, which was obviously a great time, but at that time I felt like maybe just before the lockdown, maybe a year before the lockdown, I think I started to do a project on the side as well, just to obviously get a bit more money and just get a bit more experience on smaller scale projects, because I used to work on schools and museum and offices in London. So it was nice to just do a bit of a residential small house scale. And I think that led to more opportunities and maybe 3 more jobs came up. And then I think I was a bit in between, obviously my daytime job and then these 3 jobs on top. So at some point I had to make a choice anyway. And then that's where we started to discuss that something needed to happen. I needed to quit probably my job to be able to do, the best I could in those new jobs rather than doing a bit of both not that well. And then Tom decided then to join, and that's how we set it up. But yeah, that was quite scary, I guess, as a start. But yeah, I think it was worth it overall.
I think, I guess my advice would be, if you are considering that, to make that jump if you can. I think we probably could have even done it maybe even sooner on reflection. But yeah, I think I would definitely advocate being sort of self-employed.
Yeah.
I think it's quite scary at that time because you're obviously giving up your salary and your security. But I think the opportunities will not have come up if we had not quit our jobs in some ways, because you don't have enough time to do all of it. So I think we wouldn't be where we are now if we had not just take that leap, I guess.
Yeah. And what does a typical day look like for you? And on that, what is it that you do? Are you literally conjuring up the idea of a house and then putting it to tracing paper and then sending it to builders? So talk me through.
So there's lots of different sort of stages in the project that you can be at. There's like a REBA, so Royal Institute of British Architects has like a stage, a plan of work, which is quite dry, but that's quite useful to identify where you're at in the process. There's like 0, which is literally just meeting the client for the first time, briefing them. Then there's like planning stages, then there's tendering the job, there's construction phase, handover, all of those things. You could be doing any one of those things on any given day, and it varies quite a lot, I think, as well. You could be doing quotes one day for a client, then you could be on site the next day. And it's a lot of juggling of different types of, people you're speaking to. So engineers, clients, planners, building control, all of these different people have different ways of communicating. I think being able to juggle all of that as a communicator is very, very important to the job. I think that's like one of the main challenges, I suppose.
And I guess it's really different because if you're in a bigger practice, this is not necessarily going to happen because you're obviously going to be, let's say I was in a practice of, let's say 100 people. And so you are put on a project and you're going to do a specific task, and probably if you're good at it, you're going to repeat that task. They're going to put you to another project doing that task again. When I guess if you become your own, like director of your own practice, you have, as Tom said, like you have to take care of everything. So it's a lot of, you really have to juggle a lot. So I think at that point, the days don't necessarily look the same, but it's a lot more maybe behind a computer than you think. Like, I guess when we were studying, you had this image of all the things you're going to do. And actually a lot of time, even creating, you do some drawings, but you're a lot testing as well on your computer rather than just, this romantic idea that you're going to be drawing every day or on site every day. And it's a bit of that, but it's a lot being behind your desk as well.
Mm-hmm. What skill sets would you say you need to enter this profession?
I think first of all, you do need to have that real design creative skill, as in you want to be able to solve problems through design, make things look beautiful. Ideally, that's the end goal. We're trying to achieve that. But I think a lot of the job which doesn't get talked about is like the communication aspect. So you're just constantly trying to juggle different personalities, different kind of agendas. And you've also got to work hard. That's like it's a every job is hard in its own way, but there is a very clear culture in architecture, especially in education, of pretty long hours and hard work. So I think if you want to achieve something great, you do need to kind of work for it. I think that's something that I would say to someone embarking on that kind of career.
Yeah, it's true. The whole speaking to people is very important, because especially when you do small residential projects, because you're going to be one-on-one with the client, which might be a couple, they might not necessarily agree together. So you really have to have this kind of personal skin where you can really try to understand what they want and try to make both of their vision come true in one, I guess. And something I would say as well is, I remember when I was studying, they were really saying that you needed to be very good at math and actually, there was really I was really bad at math, and they basically told me I would never be an architect because of it. And actually I realized that wasn't necessarily true, because we don't do that much math on a daily basis. And, obviously you probably need to have some understanding because you want to review structure and all of that, but it's not necessarily the job. So it's more, I think more, the creative side. I guess
also, maybe this is going off different topic, but I think it'd be good as for people that are looking to get into the career, I think getting as much variety of experience. Like a big practice is run very differently from what we do. And I think having a big project experience versus, like Lea said, a house for a couple, they're very, very different animals and different ways of working. So I think getting a big, broad, I think we've both now worked in big and small firms, and I think, that's really beneficial.
Also, it was really nice, when I was in my bigger practice, everyone has such a different background and such different, skill set. And actually I think, the broader your skill set is, the better, I guess, because it doesn't have to be just, some people were really good. I don't used to be really good in fashion, all of that, obviously all around kind of creative side, but I don't think you needed to be just, there isn't just one path, I guess. I mean, there is mainly one path to get there in terms of studies, but I don't think there is.
Yeah, there's also paths from architecture as well. Lots of our friends have now become maybe game designers or film set designers, development. There's lots of different ways you can feed off of that, I think.
Yeah, but do you have to get certain qualifications before you can officially become an architect?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, you do. although it's a tricky thing because you have to go through that process to become an architect, which is a protected title. But at the same time, in this country, there isn't actually anyone can do a set of drawings. Like anyone, like you don't need any qualifications to do a set of drawings to build from, which is obviously difficult because it then promotes a bit of a culture of potentially undercutting or people that don't necessarily provide the same service but we're competing with. So I suppose, like it's difficult. That's something we don't like. For example, I think in Belgium and to a lesser extent in France, you have, I think anything beyond, let's say, 50 square meters has to be like signed by an architect. And like all the drawings have to be certified by an architect. We don't have that here. So that's something we hope one day may change, but it's just something to be aware of. I think like for someone that's at the beginning of that journey to realize how things work in this country. I think things may change because of, Grenfell Tower and the things that followed that, but we're not there yet. So.
I think it's probably the main issue, like going into that profession, people don't realize that, but I think that's probably the main issue is how hard you're going to have to fight to prove your value and your expertise, and also, like trying for client to understand that it's not just about pretty drawing and all of that. It's about all the things you learn to create that, the space that they want and all of that, that potentially someone that is still very good at drawing, plan might not have because they haven't necessarily had this experience in that way. So it's difficult. Like it's quite difficult. It's, for us on a daily basis with like fees and all of that to prove your value to the clients that why they're paying that service versus someone that would be 50% cheaper. But so that's probably the main issue of the job, I guess.
In terms of like fees and like getting reward for your time, I suppose that's one of the struggles.
Do you set your own rates as sort of your own business, or is there a standard for the UK that you have to charge a certain amount?
There used to be, like 20 years ago, there used to be like everyone would just charge a percentage of the construction cost of the project, and that's now been kind of phased out slowly as the project is more complicated. There's more risk maybe, so now we price everything kind of like on the job, like as in we price everything individually based on the size of the project, the budget, the perceived risk or difficulty with the job. We do have kind of hourly rates, but we tend to just price everything like lump sum.
Yeah, I think it's a mix between, we always try to look at that percentage still, like to have an overall idea of how much it should be, but then it can be plus or minus depending of the experience we have and how hard the project is going to be and how many hours I guess we're going to put on. But there is still that idea, at least between the architect, that it should be around that like 10% mark or something. But obviously that's where if you have people undercutting at you, then it kind of change because so it's a hard balance between obviously not going too low to not lose a value, but also not lose a job, and ensuring that you're not undercutting other architects as well, so the profession doesn't because if everyone does that, then and there would be no rules anymore.
Yeah. In your studies or in your own practice, does the idea of sustainability and the environment come into it at all?
Yeah, very much so. I think you're trained maybe to not just to think about like technology, but also just think about like building principles when you're taught in university. Generally speaking, I think good design by itself can do quite a lot without just like adding loads of mechanical systems and whatever, PVs, heat pumps. I think just like the principles of good design go a long way. And I think people have been thinking about this for a long time anyway as architects. So I think it's always a consideration.
I think though there is also a lot of really new exciting, things like hemcrete and all of that we all want to explore. But then obviously the client needs to be on board because that has a cost. So people again don't necessarily see the benefits long term, like something that obviously more costly at the start is going to obviously be better for them in the future in the long term, but that straight away they might not see that. So again, because it comes with an added cost, then sometimes you can't do it within the budget. But as Tom said, we are obviously going to think about, with the position of the extension or the glazing and all of that, the insulation, internal insulation, all of that.
I think people are getting more and more, like clients are getting more and more demanding of that, I think, as well, like air quality, noise, all of these things. Now we know that they have detrimental effects on our well-being. So the information's there. So people are getting more and more like requiring that, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. You used the word romantic to describe the profession earlier, and I think that's so apt because my understanding of an architect is, you know, Liam Neeson in Love Actually, lots of tracing paper across the kitchen. And you've briefly touched on it as well, but were there any more myths about the industry and the job itself that you wanted to debunk?
When we studied, we did start learning how to do tracing paper and all of that, because one, it's a great way to learn, you know, about scale and about drawings and, you know, line type, none of that. But obviously now with all the softwares, people don't necessarily do that on a daily basis. And some people still do it. Obviously it takes probably longer, but it's quite rare. So basically it would be great to be with, you know, your tracing paper. It would be pretty more relaxing than what we do. And then I guess the money side as well. I think every time we speak to someone about being an architect, everyone assumes that therefore you are really living in an amazing house and that you're probably quite wealthy. And I don't think that's the case. I think if you want to go in that profession, you need to be really passionate about it more than, don't go in for the money. No. Go because you love the design and love the idea of, you know, changing someone's daily life, or, I mean, to a certain extent, obviously, it's still houses, but, or, you know, still, I mean, there is an impact when you do schools and all of that. It's incredible, but yeah, not the money, I don't think, unless you are very, very successful and probably maybe then 50, 60 years old, that, you know, maybe then you will reach a certain amount of salary.
Yeah. If you're like a partner at, let's say, Foster and Partners, maybe you're making good money, but that's literally one out of thousands of people. And yeah, it's not what you maybe think it could be. But there are lots of positives, and you can travel the world, generally speaking, with that degree. You can work anywhere in the world, more or less. And yeah, you can. If you want to work hard, you can make a difference to people's lives differently. But you've got to really, really, really want to do it.
Mm-hmm. Is it your choice whether you work on residential or community buildings like libraries, schools? Are there different pathways to go down as an architect for those types of buildings? Or are you just sort of, I'm an architect, I could literally do any type of building I wanted. I can do the Shard if I want.
I think it really depends, because as a small practice like us, because we're only two, you probably wouldn't have that opportunity, because I think you need a certain level of like insurance and, I guess, experience still. I mean, there is no pathway. Like, it's not like when you're a doctor where you have to study, you know, this pathway to be like a knee surgeon, or I don't know. But, you know, like, for example, I came to my previous practice and I did, you know, hotels, offices, museum, school, all of that with no previous experience. Obviously, as part of a bigger practice, which had the experience, so you learn on the job then. But then obviously moving away from that big environment, which I think people trust bigger practice because they have obviously a bigger portfolio and a bigger name, and they're a bit more established. So, and the insurance cost, like they have all of that in place. When you start to step away from that and going into just a smaller practice, that doesn't really happen. Or not at least that quickly. Like, you know, maybe, I mean, we love Resi, but I think we would love to then start doing other things. But we'll have to be a tiny project first, and then maybe build up from that.
I mean, I worked in residential pretty much my whole career, but that was just kind of by chance than by design. I think most practices have like an angle. They have a niche or some kind of sector that they do specialize in. So it's kind of dependent on where you choose to work, really, I think. And we're now trying to hopefully do more like housing on a larger scale, like, you know, community housing or housing association work. So that's something we're quite keen to pursue.
I'd love to do a restaurant.
Yeah, hospitality.
That's something we actually started to work on a cafe. So hopefully that will lead to other. But I mean, we have the experience for it. It's just whether you can actually attract that client, because you're smaller practice, so they don't necessarily know you as well yet.
Okay, but you could make a name for yourself, and somebody could approach you and say, we'd like you to build the Shard 2.2.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it would be too small for a few more people. Like, in theory, you could, obviously, with the right infrastructure. But I mean, you could, like, for example, we probably could do a hotel, let's say hotel design or interior design a lot. You could do that as well.
I mean, there are people in the world that have done competitions as friends, almost like students, and practices have been born out of these competitions. You know, it's a very, very small chance of winning, but if you do win them, you really can, you know, grow pretty quickly.
And that could be any project. Like, you could be, a student could be I don't know, doing a hotel in, I don't know, Bali as a competition, and they win because their project and design was really interesting. And then, you happen from there. And
yeah. I mean, so it's very common for people to work, let's say, in a big practice for, let's say, 5 to 10 years and then break away and set up their own thing. That's throughout the world, that happens all the time. So I think, I guess a big practice maybe gives you that flexibility to find something a sector that you like or that you've got a skill for, and then if you want to, you can move away from it.
And I guess it gives you opportunity as well to like learn different things at different stages, because most practice are still, having that discussion with you on what you would like to do. And, maybe you've been a long time on that type. I used to be a lot at some point on doing just visualization, which I loved. But obviously that was not really part of the actual job. It was just to win competition out of that. And then when I asked to be more on a project, then they got me a project to run. And that was a big learning curve, but it was great in that sense. So, yeah.
Amazing. What advice would you give for anyone looking to become an architect?
I guess do your research. I guess at a young age, just check. If you do want to make money, I think maybe just check the fees. It's all published. Like Reba has a fee schedule and estimated earnings for different experience levels. Do your research, and then I think a lot of people in this country can design well, but they don't necessarily know how to build or how buildings are built. So I'd say if you're young and you want to get experience, I'd say get on a building site and do a whatever internship or work experience in a builder, and just learn about basic building. I think that would set you off on a good start.
It's really hard though, because I feel like when you are not at uni and then you are working, you kind of lose that whole naivety and freshness that in a way was great. So I'm not sure I agree, because I feel like you probably need that naivety and freshness and all this idea to go through the studies without any issue. And then, because it's almost like child becoming adult, just enjoy your childhood, and then you have all your life to become, because I think, in reality, once you actually start the job, you have so many constraints, so many real life issues that makes the project not as maybe feasible or fun, or that all the ideas you have. So maybe it's better to cultivate all your creative side at school, learn as much as possible of precedent, architect, all the more theoretical things. Go to lecture, go to drawings, and if you, in my office before, everyone had such amazing skills that so drawing, sculpture, cultivate your creative side, and then obviously knowing that one day you might be a bit crushed, not in a bad way, but you know what I mean? I think
the reality.
Yeah, the reality is a bit different. So you need to know that. But I think enjoy those years of studies, because I think if you already start to think about the boring things, it's kind of, and you need to have an idea of it, because it is quite hard. Even the studies are quite hard. And as Tom was saying, there is this culture as well. I'm a bit less now, I think, but of quite harsh critics when you're through the school. At least I think they're starting to stop that a bit, because it was a bit soul crushing in some ways. But I think putting your idea out there and then having them crush is quite difficult already. So, what was this? I don't know what I want to say anymore.
I guess that was the point about the build, construction knowledge. I think you would set yourself apart maybe from the rest by having that. A lot of people can spend 6 months designing a library in school, in university, but to actually know all of these real life issues, not many people know that when they come out of university.
Yeah, that's true. It's quite long. It's 7 years. It's 7 years, yeah. Wow. And by the time you do, obviously, with the Part 3, the Part 3 is more about law and contract and all of that. It's not anymore. It's more about how to set up your own practice and how that system works. So it's not really about the design, but not a lot of people know how to do a lot of things, to be honest. You just know how to design, which is great, but not in a practical way. So that's true in the sense that I guess for us, now we work, if we want to employ a Part 1 or someone like that, it would be probably better for us as a practice to have someone that has a bit, it's quite a lot to ask for that age, but that also has a better understanding of how the building system work.
Also, it impacts how you design as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, if you know.
But that's also the sad thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
Because it impacts. I feel a bit sad sometimes about when you design. Even now, we were talking about stages, so we do start with like all these first ideas and the concept, and which is always the way you start with a project. But I will always think ahead about, is that going to be feasible to design, or how is that going to be planning wise, or is that how much it's going to cost and all of that. So, which you need to, but it's also a bit sad because you probably don't push yourself harder in some ideas, I guess.
Yeah.
Amazing. That's all of my questions. Was there anything else that you guys wanted to add?
I still think if you want to do it and you're passionate about design and creativity, and there is something still amazing. Like, obviously we've been a bit more gloomy and all of that, but there is something amazing to see your project that you had in your head on paper coming to life, and then people live in it, and hopefully that makes a change to their life, and that is really incredible. But you have to know that to get to that stage, a project timeline is actually quite long, so it would at least be a year or more before you see it completed from the moment you first spoke to the client. So, and with lots of it's not that easy. So I think do it, but you need to be passionate, not necessarily want a lot of money. No.
But yeah, if you the right project with the right client and the right, you can really make something really special.
And I mean, also that right now we are speaking mainly about when we have on practice. I think when you're a bigger practice, you don't really deal with the clients. So maybe your creative side is more, reality for someone that comes out of uni. They're going to be put more on the creative side anyway, on competition or on the ideas. And there is someone else going to take over the, client relationship and fees and all of that. So in that sense, that is fun. Like, I think in the bigger practice is maybe more fun. The only downside to that is you might not experience all of the stages. You might not experience everything. So at some point you might get a bit frustrated by it and want to do your own things. Some people don't, but that's completely fine. Yeah. So I think right now we're speaking from people having our own practice. So it's a bit a different view in that sense. That's why we have less time to be creative, I guess.
Perfect. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.